Mr. Sherrill, you want to do your segment for a little bit, or you tired, or what?
Well, let me turn this so I get in the picture. Okay. You can see today I didn't get a chance to go home. Normally Steve was very close to me, and so usually after his segment is earlier, I go to my house and then I do what I do. But tonight we're just going to do it all from one location. So what I want to kind of talk about tonight is our viewers getting on the Zoom participation. I think tonight we've got 18 or 20, 28, something like that. And it gives you a chance to participate live and ask questions during their segments. It makes you an actual part of the overall show. But even after the show, we continue on after what you don't see. If you're on Zoom, the guys are hanging around. They're talking about, what's going on their layouts. If they have projects, if they're running into problems, just general stuff. You get a chance to meet the modelers who have shown you how to build buildings and weather and the other things that they do. You also get to talk to maybe people from Australia, Canada. We have a lot of Canadians, great modelers. Sometimes we even get to see some of the layouts. If we, beg hard enough, they'll walk around their layout and show us. But we just generally get a chance to socialize. It's very informal, and it's a thing that we can do if we are Zoom participants. And you have to subscribe and request to be a Zoom participant, and then you'll have all the benefits of that. So people who are going to watch this on YouTube, there's another thing that you can do to actually enjoy this show a lot more and get more out of it by meeting the actual participants after the show on the Zooms. So I strongly recommend you doing that. And maybe it will inspire you to perform and build something on the show. So that's about all I have to say on the Zooms. If anybody else wants to chip in, it's, let them know what we do after the show. Sometimes we're on for an hour, sometimes longer, sometimes less. It just depends on, what's going on with us during that day or that week. So is there any news from Canada we need to share now? Hey, come on.
It's colder than heck up here.
Yeah. We've had here. But
well, not in this house. Maybe you can hear the background. You can hear a fan running. My son just did a 20K bike ride for a workout. Now he's hot, so he's got the fan blowing the cool air. It's very nice out for working. I've been working in the backyard on my layout, but that's nothing too much. Hoping to get down to Harrisburg next week and see all you guys.
Yeah, it's going to be good to see you.
I'll see you and Steve.
Yeah, Tom.
That ought to be a good show.
Well,
That
maybe
ought to be a good show.
from there. That would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? In the future, to maybe set that up where we could talk to the model
It
who are
would
on
be.
site.
It would be.
Mafia?
We could walk around the show and see what manufacturers are there and what people are really up to. It'd be very interesting.
We could do some interviews, make a video.
Yeah, I think we ought to, Tom. Why don't you, I assign you that.
You need to check with you need to check with Al, because he may have somebody that he's already asked to do that. I don't know.
I'll
Okay.
ask him. He's a friend of
But
mine.
yeah, but you ought to ask Al.
Well,
Al does such a nice job with these shows. He really does. I mean,
Yeah.
the time and effort that he puts forth trying to get this thing done and put it together and all the rest of it, it's not an easy thing to do, and hats off to him for doing it.
yeah. Well,
I tell you, just like the guy that I met this afternoon, can you imagine this? This show has been going on, this S Fest that I've never even heard of. They've been having this thing for 47 years. And the
Yes.
guy that was doing it, that believed in it, died, and nobody wanted to pick it up. And
Huh.
this guy picked it up to make sure that it had, some life to continue. And he said the reason nobody else wanted it, they were scared to do it. They didn't feel comfortable without, having all the I's dotted and know where all the problems were. They just didn't feel comfortable stepping into it. And you got to admire a guy like this guy now that stepped into it and said, well, if nobody else will, I will. And
after the first show, it gets easy.
Yeah.
well, you know how to do it after the first show.
What, Jim, how many shows have been produced so far? Do you know from number one?
From what? For us?
Yes. Yeah, for new tracks.
Well, it's once a week for about 4.5 years. That's how
Wow.
many. And sometimes at some points we did twice a week. And
Yeah.
then we did train shows. We did virtual train shows during the pandemic. And we did some of those. And and it's interesting now. I think that I think that you may see more and more joint conventions come along that are part virtual and part physical, because I think people are figuring out that it's tough to hold a physical convention and make a lot of money. I don't know the exact dollar amount, but I heard that the last G scale convention out on the West Coast, I forget exactly where it was. The promoters, that convention lost $100,000.
What?
And
Lost.
I could be wrong the exact amount of money, but my memory serves it was $100,000 that the convention lost, and that was the G scale convention.
Well, I'm not sure they get the participation that, they should have or that they need. I know when it was here in Washington, they lost a lot of money also. These conventions are just getting too expensive to attend. And as we get older, we don't feel like we can go away for a week. I mean, we have things at home we have to take care of. I mean, I may not even go to Pittsburgh, and that's the closest narrow gauge convention in years for me. I mean, because I don't, I just don't know if I can be away that long.
Well, can I chime in and let you guys know about something that happened here in the Mideast region of the NMRA? I'm part of the Potomac Division, and as you know, Jack has set up the Mideast Region's convention for this year down in North Carolina, and they were planning to have the 2025 Mideast Region convention in New Jersey. But just about 2 months ago, the New Jersey division, which had been working on it for over a year, let the Mideast region know that the hotels in their area were too expensive for them to actually be able to use. And they've had to cancel the convention. They were looking for another division that might be able to pull it off in under a year's setup time. But it doesn't look like any division is going to be able to do that. So we may not have a regional convention next year just because of the cost of the hotels. Now, New Jersey is not necessarily a cheap place, but it's just sad that, you know, the cost of the hotels can actually control whether you can have a convention or not.
Why don't you
Well-
do it virtual?
There has been some talk about that. They might end up holding something virtual. The regional people will be looking into that. And the reason I know about it, they came to our division to see if we could do it. And we just said in under a year, wouldn't have enough time to pull everything together. But there was some talk about possibly doing a virtual one. So that may happen. That may end up saving it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as you know, in the PCR convention, we did a virtual hybrid convention, and I actually had some conversations last week at O Scale West over the weekend with David Vaughn about the O Scale.
Phil, you're cutting out. I don't know what's the matter.
Oh,
You're
that's
coming and
interesting.
going.
Well, let me try restarting this. I'll drop off.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And now
I
you
hear you fine, Phil.
I can hear you.
Anyway, I had a long conversation with David Vaughn, and then to talk to the O Scale Central about the potential of doing a virtual convention. I think, when you look at a regional convention, still having a physical convention is desirable, but the hotels are, as you indicated, Greg, getting harder and harder in terms of the cost structure. But a virtual convention, especially for areas like O Scale, where the modelers are a smaller community but very distributed, makes a lot of sense. And doing a pure virtual convention versus a hybrid is significantly less effort. Trying to integrate the two together is a real challenge. I think as a group, we need to think more and more about how to do those different things. So, but you're right. The challenges of doing conventions and getting convention attendees are getting harder and harder. So that
This
was
is
I can tell
just
you,
something to think about. But the Zoom meeting that we're on right now is kind of a base platform that could be used for a virtual convention. And I
Yeah.
know that for the times that I've been on, there's been a number of times where people couldn't make the obligation that they said they were going to make as far as being a presenter. But if we could get enough people to be presenters and make sure that they were going to be there when they say they're going to be there, we have the platform already. And I'm kind of wondering whether or not we could extend what we're doing here to actually put on a virtual convention. And it wouldn't have to be any region. It could be
we-
countrywide.
Well, and we
We-
did the 2021 NMRA National Convention. What we did it a bit more sophisticated. Once you get over about 100 people, Zoom starts losing. There's a lot of challenges in Zoom,
Okay.
especially managing who's attending, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're, and how you manage that, the Zoom has a webinar product, which is designed to do webinars where there's much more invitations. It's much more people presenting on stage, kind of. There's a real difference in this meeting. Everyone, except for the host, who kind of has some controls, everyone's kind of equal. In their webinar product, the people that are presenting are kind of on a stage, and the audience is separated and can't actually talk or interact unless they're actually called upon by the host. And so when you do a large convention where you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 people, there actually are some pretty interesting tools now available to manage those. So, if there's an interest in someone in driving a large convention like that, we should definitely have a conversation. Having been through it, I think we've done out here in this area probably 7 or 8 virtual convention or events. We've done a number of the SIG meets that have been done virtually. Done another number of regional meets, et cetera. So I think it's a way. And the thing about it is that at least out here, we never get more than 20 to 25% of the membership to come to a convention. And so you really are not serving, probably 50% of the members never come to a convention. 50%, 20, some percentage go to a convention every year, and another percentage goes when it's local and they don't have to go to a hotel. But there are a lot of people that never go to a convention. So, if we extending that, I think becomes a really interesting way of engaging people, even if they're not that far away. So, I think it's a very interesting way of adding value, but kind of the step between what we're doing here is a kind of a meetup and a much more formal convention structure.
Mhm.
But it's funny, because going back to what you said about this being a platform for it, I think what you have to consider is if you're going to do a virtual whatever, whether you call it a train show, whether you call it a meetup, whether you call it a convention, whatever you want to call it. If you're going to do it virtually, then there's two factors. One, the number of people that you're trying to attract to actually be on their computer looking at the screen for X number of hours at a time, versus the number of people that are going to look at that video or segments of that video for no telling how much time in the future. When we were doing, during the pandemic, when we were doing the train shows, we had no more than 50 to 75 people at a time.
You're
On
breaking up,
Zoom,
Jim.
actually looking at what we were doing with each one of the vendors.
Jim, you're breaking up
Fourth train
badly.
show, by around 1,200 views of the train. I don't know why,
Yeah, I don't know.
and can you hear me now or not?
Yes, when you're close there for a minute, yes.
Okay, and I can't tell you why, but for me, the value of it and what the vendors were saying, the value to them, and I'm assuming the same would go for a clinician, but that's my assumption. They were more interested in the views that they got than the number of people that were attending.
Sure.
If the purpose of holding a virtual meeting, convention, whatever, is to try to capture the friendships, the seeing friends again, then that's a totally different situation, in my opinion, and has to be put on in a totally different way than if you're showing how to do something, clinics, maybe somebody's layout, maybe a prototype, something where people can, it doesn't matter whether they're there or not. And I think if you're going to go virtual, you have to first make the decision of what is your goal. Is it getting the number of people to see the video or to see some part of what you're trying to produce? Or is it the number of people that you want there on the screen watching it live? And I think it's totally two different situations. At least that's my experience. And I think what Phil is talking about is doing the virtual as close to a physical as you can. And to me, that's a totally different situation than doing a virtual to convey information and to have vendors be able to show products that people probably don't even know exist, from vendors that they probably don't even know exist, and hear people talk about building something and learning how to build from that discussion. And what you lose in that is they can't, you're not going to shake hands with them. They're not going to pat you on the back. You're not going to laugh and joke and have a drink at the bar and so forth. that's what you lose.
You know,
Phil,
Jim,
Phil,
it's
you might want
interesting.
to talk to.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So one of the things we did this at the national, and we did it at the PCR convention, is took advantage of something we don't use in these sessions very much, which are called breakout rooms. So within Zoom, you can create a bunch of basically sub meetings. So within this meeting, you have a breakout room. And if you go into the breakout room, you leave this meeting and go into a meeting that's in the breakout room. And what we did was had 2 or 3 vendors that were in breakout rooms. And there was a time that was dedicated to breakout rooms, and you could choose which vendor you wanted to go see. And it's a really interesting thing, because the thing that's different about a convention versus this meeting is, right, this meeting is a singularity. I'm talking, Jim was talking, someone else is going to talk. It's a linear series of people talking. The difference in a convention is you have 100 conversations going on simultaneously. And so one of the questions is, how do you replicate that? Because that's how you meet people at a convention, talk to your old friends, talk about things that are interesting, focus on topics. And the breakout rooms actually let you do that. And the way I kind of convey it to people is, don't think about it as a Zoom meeting. Think about it as a hotel that has suites for vendors, right? So you ever been to a convention or something where companies get suites at the hotel, and you walk down a hallway and there's a sign outside of each suite or each room that's got the name of the company, and you can just walk in the door, talk to that company for 15 minutes. When you get your questions answered, you walk out the door. So it's not a presentation any longer. It's totally set up for interaction. And we had 9 vendors and a couple, 3 associations that were part of this. And there were 20 to 40 people in some of those breakout rooms. And they would come and go. And I talked to Dennis Brennan. What Dennis did was he took a whole bunch of pictures about his products, his models, and he put those all in a PowerPoint deck and had it all set up with the 2 screens with the presentation manager and PowerPoint. And somebody would ask a question, well, tell me something about your kit. And he would immediately click to the photo, bring it up in PowerPoint, share the screen, and say, well, here's how you do that in my kits. And those kind of interactions are, in many ways, the kind of things you get at a convention when you go talk to someone and they can actually show you what they're doing, describe it. And I think that's what creates this feeling that you're not going to a meeting to listen. You're actually going there more to interact. You have to create those opportunities for people to interact as a group. So if anyone's interested in trying to do some of this, very much would be more than willing to sit down and talk to you about how to do it. Not only kind of what are the elements you need to do, but what are the resources you have to make it happen. For those of you who went to the virtual convention, you all met Sydney. What you don't know until you think about it a second is Sydney spent 3 days from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. So that's 14 hours basically hosting you guys. And you have to find somebody who's willing to do that. And that's a really challenging job to do. Or you have to have multiple people do it. When the national, what we did was we had multiple rooms. We actually had multiple hosts in different areas. But if you want to do it, it's a great way of extending the convention beyond the people that can physically get to the convention. And like you said, it's getting harder from a travel cost perspective, from a lodging perspective, kind of from all the perspectives. And by the way, if you're doing a regional convention and you're trying to use a hotel, the food and beverage in our convention went up by 80% from 2020 to 2024. So food and beverage has become just a killer at hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Well, let me give you an example. For Phil's convention he's talking to out there, the total cost to be a part of the virtual part of his convention, the total cost was $30.
Yeah.
So as a vendor, you could spend $30. You got a video that could be shown at the convention, and you got a breakout room, and it cost you $30, and you didn't have to leave home, and you didn't have to pack all your stuff, and you didn't have to unload it, and you didn't have to pay all the union costs if there are union costs to have the union labor do it for you, and you didn't have travel costs. or food cost, except the munchies that you sat on the couch while you were watching the videos play. Versus, and Phil, how much would it cost with the hotel and food and so forth to actually attend your convention?
It's orders of magnitude difference, right? So a convention, 150 bucks for the convention, 170 bucks for the convention. Hotel rooms now, you can't get anything for less than, grossed up 160, 150, 160, 170 dollars a night. Hard to get under 200 most places. I don't know if anybody's going to the national convention, but I think you're going to be up closer to 3. It's going to be 275 a night. The room's 209. You got parking and other stuff, and then you put taxes on top of it. And most cities look at hotels as passing taxes on hotels is really easy because the voters don't have to pay the taxes. Somebody else does. It's very easy to vote other people's money. And so a lot of these, you look at a lot of cities, they have a 10 or 15% hotel tax. So, you pay 10% sales tax and 15% hotel tax. By the time you get done, you're putting a 25% markup, 20 bucks for parking, and you put that on top, your 209 becomes 280. And, for a 4 or 5 day convention, now you're up to $1,200-$1,500.
And Phil, then
versus-
you could easily double that or triple that if you flew in from the East Coast and rented
Got that
cars.
right.
Yep. No,
Okay.
exactly. And, it's becoming, and the question is, how much of the convention value can you deliver? So layout tours are very interesting because you can't do layout tours the same way at a virtual convention. By the way, having somebody walk around their layout with an iPhone is incredibly difficult to manage and watch, just because nobody knows how to do it. But most of the good layouts that are open have been videoed by somebody. And so what you can do is share the videos as part of the process and then set up instead a clinic or a meet the layout owner time where you come in and you maybe go to a breakout and you can meet the layout owner and talk to them about the layout and ask the questions about the layout. So, it's kind of how do you replicate the experiences or recreate them in that virtual way? But you're absolutely right. I think it's a way of bringing us together. And the other thing is, unfortunately, we seem to be aging, and as we're aging, our community seems to be aging, and as we age, the health ability of people to travel is becoming significant too.
You have a question, Phil?
Yes.
Gentleman Jeff Thornton, he asked if I had another commitment. Can I still pay and watch the videos?
So the problem with breakout rooms is right now they don't have separate video recording the way Zoom is set up. I don't know if that's something they can do in other ways, but the normal systems don't do that. So the breakout rooms are, so think about that the clinics being recorded, and then that's a decision about whether you make those available or not afterwards, and you make them available to participants for some period of time. We did it for about 2 weeks. So all the videos that were done in the virtual, which was 1 room out of 3 at the convention, those were all recorded. They were broken up. They were put up on YouTube for about 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks after the convention, I think. And basically everyone who went to the physical convention and who went to the virtual convention had the opportunity to see those. But after 2 weeks, we took them down. And there's those of you who've run conventions, there's a big discussion about, do you give away the value and will people come to the convention? It's kind of a challenge. And by the way, this is happening everywhere that people are missing their numbers. I was out here at O-Scale West, and O-Scale West didn't make their numbers this year. And I think it's going to be very challenging whether or not they actually have another event next year, because all the committee members are being asked to reach into their pocket to pay the difference between what the convention, they didn't make their room nights. The problem with the convention at a hotel is the minute you don't make your room nights, things get really hairy really fast. I mean, if your room nights are, that 150 bucks a night, 170 bucks a night, and you miss 20 nights, that's $4 grand you owe. And so all of a sudden at the end, you're sitting there needing to write a check to the hotel for $3,000 or $4,000, and you got to look around and say, who's going to do it? And so, I think that's one of the other challenges. I think it's going to get harder and harder to get people to take on the financial responsibility of running one of these things.
Well, and see that I agree with you 100%. That's why, to me, I think I think we may have come awfully close to reaching a point where you're going to be either having a virtual event or
I'm
you're
not
not
sure.
going to have, because people can't afford it. They can't afford going to them, and if they don't attend, then the people that are putting them on can't afford to put them on.
Yep.
And some of them will discount.
I mean, it's as simple as that. And really what it comes down to is what you're trying to achieve from the virtual convention. If you're trying to replicate a physical convention, that's one thing. If you're trying to pass a lot of information to a lot of different people, that's totally different than replicating a physical convention. Would you agree with that, Phil?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a, how you structure it can be very different. So the thing about the replication of a physical convention, the biggest thing to me is this creating places where people can interact, right? And having a way for me to meet somebody who's interested, or at the end of a clinic, talk to 3 other people that were interested in that topic and go have a conversation. Just like, think about what you do at a convention when you walk out in the hallway and you start talking to each other, and how do you kind of replicate that experience? I think if you're very much focused on, information dissemination, that's where you see things like an MRAX is much more around the idea of, let's have a speaker, have questions, and there's a beginning and end. There's a beginning with the speaker, there are questions, and then it ends. I mean, the thing that's interesting about New Tracks is, we do that, but we also have during the actual show, these kinds of discussions, and then kind of more of an open community discussion afterwards. On the other hand, we really don't break up into smaller groups. For example, would it be interesting for Tom to host a breakout room where you could go ask Tom questions for an hour? And that's kind of the difference, is to think about it. We in this kind of environment with the scale we are, it probably doesn't make sense. But if you had 300 people and Tom came in and did a clinic, you may find 15 people that would like to spend an hour talking to Tom about how he models, or talk to Martin about how to do, underbody detail or something specific, and take those skills. So anyway, it's an interesting change for our hobby, I think, going forward.
Bill, we do have a breakout room on here.
Oh yeah, you can do breakout rooms in here.
Yeah.
We can do them. It's not that we can't do them.
Yeah.
It's just we don't normally do them.
No, we don't.
Because this is kind of a group. This is more of a group activity, I think. And again, this is what I think of as a meetup, where everybody comes together and we're all kind of meeting up and interacting together. And if you want to talk to somebody individually, you just do it in the chat. But it's something you could think about. You could say, well, when Tom gets, it's an interesting perspective. We do this concept of the clinic goes on, and it would be an interesting thought. So Tom does his session, and when he gets done, he goes to a breakout room. And if you want to, you can follow Tom to the breakout room and talk to him versus listening to the next segment. And so that's kind of a way of changing how we interact with each other on these things.
And see, we could do that kind of thing. It's just a question of, frankly, nobody has ever asked for it to be done before. We've never really talked about doing it before, but there's no reason why we can't. I mean, there's no magic to this. This show has evolved from the first one that was done. This is totally different than that one was. We can do it any way we want to do it.
I don't think a lot of people know we have a breakout room on here.
Well, I didn't know we had a breakout room on this.
We do.
Well,
So basically the breakout rooms are there. I would have to create a breakout room. If you guys would like, I'll create a breakout room. You can go try a breakout room.
Why don't we do a breakout? We could do a breakout room, and everybody that wants to can stay with Phil. I'm going to bed. The show.
That's them old guys for you.
Anyway, I gotta say, guys, we gotta terminate the show as far as the actual show is concerned. Everybody can stay longer and keep the conversation going, but we've got to terminate the show. So if we could run our caboose.